The left is going absolutely bonkers over the Dobbs versus Jackson's women's health case currently in front of the Supreme Court. That's right. Today we're going to be talking about abortion. Hello everyone, welcome to the Sovereign States. My name is Brian, appreciate you checking out the channel. If you like what you see here or some of my other videos, please hit that subscribe button, leave some comments. I'd love to hear from you, tell me what you think, give me your opinions. Love to start that dialogue, so please feel free to leave your comments and we'll go from there. So, as I said at the beginning, the left is losing their minds. Their sacred cow of abortion may end up being placed on the altar for sacrifice. Probably not. Call me cynical, but we've been down this road before. That's probably not going to happen. The chances of Roe versus Wade being completely overturned, I don't know. Call me cynical, but I just don't necessarily see that happen. But it's possible. It could happen. And this is the chances of it are higher in this particular case than they ever have been, probably. So, the so-called conservative justices, and I call them that because I thought the Supreme Court wasn't supposed to be a political body. More on that later. So, the so-called conservative justices, they're making some pretty strong points against Roe versus Wade in the arguments with the plaintiff in this case, which is Jackson Women's Health. So this article that you see on the screen is from Politico. So let me read a little bit of it and we'll get started on this. The Supreme Court's liberal and conservative justices clashed Wednesday during arguments over Mississippi's 15-week abortion ban, with each member of the 6-justice conservative supermajority. Should we really be using these terms, supermajority and conservative and so forth, when we're talking about the Supreme Court? Again, not supposed to be a political body, right? No. They were expressing openness to significantly paring back or completely overturning abortion rights protections guaranteed under Roe versus Wade. That's funny. I wasn't under the impression that the Supreme Court opinions guaranteed rights at all. I thought the law did that, namely the Constitution. But what do I know? Anyway, arguments by the lawyers for abortion rights groups and the Biden administration. Why the Biden administration is involved in this case? They are not a party to this case. Why should they even be in the room? That's an important question. Anyway, arguments by the lawyers for abortion rights groups and the Biden administration that the state's ban would turn back the clock on women's rights found little favor among the court's potential swing justices. Yeah, turning back the clock on women's rights. Right. Breaking with others on the bench, Chief Justice John Roberts made it clear Wednesday that he is interested in an outcome that doesn't completely overturn Roe versus Wade. Of course he is. Of course he is. John Roberts, he's a good guy. Okay, I don't have anything personal against him, but the guy cares more about the so-called integrity of the court than he does about the law, for God's sake. His concern should only be the evidence and the arguments made in the particular case as they apply to the plaintiff and defendant in the cases in front of him. He should only be concerned with and how the law applies and how it should be interpreted relative to that plaintiff and that defendant. He should not be concerned at all with the so-called integrity of the court. That should not factor in. That is a political distinction. And Sotomayor actually brought that up too. How could we overturn Roe versus Wade? What are people going to think? That is not your concern. As a justice, you are not supposed to be a political actor who cares about what people think. You should care about the law, and only the law. Now, so John Roberts was saying, he was repeatedly asking why banning abortion after 15 weeks of pregnancy is meaningfully different than the current standard of fetal viability, which is estimated around 24 weeks. Good question, Justice Roberts. Why should it matter? 15 weeks is still, more than 3 months? Yet his pitch for a middle ground seemed to be rejected by both his conservative colleagues and by the groups challenging the Mississippi law, which would include the three so-called liberal or left-wing justices. As both sides pointed out, even if the justices nominally leave Roe versus Wade in place, a ruling for Mississippi would functionally gut the half-century-old precedents holding that states can't ban abortion early in pregnancy and spur a wave of sweeping state-level restrictions across the country, etc., etc., etc. Well, they're right. And this is where the left comes in. There's no middle ground for them. There is no halfway, meeting people halfway. The viability argument is not really that. So, getting back to what I was saying, let's circle back to the political argument here. If the court is not supposed to be political, why is the left freaking out over the current makeup of the court? That's what they've been complaining about. That's why they basically snowballed Brett Kavanaugh, demonized Amy Coney Barrett, and Gorsuch for that matter. That's why they were so adamant about not letting them get on the court. Because the left does treat it as a political body. They have for a very, very, very long time. That's the whole point. And now that the shoe's on the other foot, they can't stand it. It drives them crazy. Could it be that the left is lying? That they do see the Supreme Court as a political body? Could it be that they have been using this unaccountable political body to ram through what they could never hope to get through the legislative process, which is where these questions are really supposed to be decided in the first place? Could that have anything to do with it? That they've lost, or potentially, I should say potentially, lost a political tool that they've been using for so long, and that now supposedly conservative-minded people, right-wing people, classical liberal people now have a hold on it, and they cannot live with that? Could it be that maybe now conservatives and non-leftist people have learned the lesson, if you can't beat them, join them, and are now playing the game better than the left? Could that have anything to do with it? Is that really what's bothering them? I don't know, maybe. Fact is that the question of abortion should have never seen a federal courtroom anywhere. Not the Supreme Court, not any federal court, anywhere. This should never have been in the courts, period. It was a mistake to even hear this case. There is no authority granted to the federal government to regulate abortion anywhere in the Constitution. That includes the courts. They have no say in this matter, as far as I'm concerned. And I can read the Constitution and understand what it means. So can everybody else. No matter what, it's not in there. There is nothing about abortion in the Constitution anywhere. Nothing could even be construed to be about abortion. And if the Constitution is completely silent on this matter, the 10th Amendment must take precedent. That is, you leave the decision with the states or the people. Now, the Roe argument is based on the supposed right to privacy, which is a stretch, frankly, of the due process argument of the 14th Amendment. Now, I'm all about privacy. I don't want the government intruding into the private lives of citizens, but at the same time, it's not really in there. Not really. That's a stretch. And then to say that that applies to abortion is a stretch of a stretch. So, to suppose that the due process clause of the 14th Amendment somehow applies to having babies killed is just a ridiculous argument on its face. Particularly if you're talking about babies being killed just simply because the mothers don't want them, which is the vast majority of abortions in the first place. I'm sorry, that argument is farcical. It's ridiculous. And it's always been ridiculous. Even pro-abortion legal scholars say that Roe was a bad decision on its merits alone. There's just no reasonable way to construe a right to abortion out of the Constitution. It's just not in there. Therefore, this should have never been in front of the court, and the central government should have no function whatsoever in this question. If you want to amend the Constitution, then you can amend the Constitution so the central government does have a say, but right now they just don't. So, and if it's really true that the right to privacy applies to all medical decisions, then I suppose a doctor, in consult with their patient, can perform any procedure, prescribe any medication that they see fit as a medical professional, and Medicare and Medicaid have nothing to say about it. They should just pay for it, no questions asked. Right? Right? Privacy, right? Now, that may not be the best analogy, but it is one, I think. Now, the other thing that's so funny about this is the hypocrisy. Now, both sides can be hypocrites in this argument. Okay, I've seen hypocrisy from both sides since this has been an issue. But I guess my vaccination status is my business. My body, my choice, and so forth, right? But these same people making that argument for abortion are the ones beating the drum for vaccine mandates. It's kind of hypocritical. Well, listen, this issue is one of the most complicated issues in existence. I don't deny that at all. And it's by far and away the most contentious, I would argue. The best thing we can do with an issue like this, that is so contentious, has us so divided, is decentralize the decision. It was a mistake for the court to weigh in and essentially write law. Because if you heard how people describe Roe v. Wade, it's been the law of the land. No. Roe v. Wade is not a law. It is not the law. It is a Supreme Court opinion of 9 unaccountable, unelected justices in 1973. It is not the law. It has never been a law. Not ever. And that's one of the biggest problems with it. Even Elizabeth Warren said that we need to codify Roe v. Wade into federal law because she knows that it's not the law. And the problem with making decisions in the courts this way is that you have 9 unaccountable, I think the Roe v. Wade decision was 7-2. So that's actually 7. You have 7 unaccountable, lifetime appointment lawyers making a decision about what the law should be. They don't have the authority to do that, first of all. But second of all, when you do things that way, the next set of justices on that court can just upend the whole thing and say, no, we don't like that. We don't like that decision. That's no good. They can do it, and they might do it. That's the problem. If you did it in law, you would have to undo the law through the legislative process, but people would have to vote on that. With the Supreme Court, there's no recourse, and you're letting a lot people that are unaccountable and unelected make a decision on what the law should be. Well, the next group of justices can just undo it. And again, you have no recourse. This is why I have a problem with executive orders. Executive orders aren't supposed to really have any weight. Executive orders are a silly concept on their face. But at least the president is accountable. At least he or she has to be elected every 4 years. Now, so as I was saying, putting this in the political realm, in the legislature where it's supposed to be, this question of abortion, and decentralizing that decision is the best course of action. Now, Roe v. Wade should be overturned on its merits because it was a ridiculous decision. And moreover, Kavanaugh pointed this out too, and I'm going to read this in a minute. that this should have never been in front of the court in the first place. This needs to be returned to the legislative branch of this country and let the legislative branch decide. Let me read exactly what he said, because what he said was really good. He said, the other side says, though, that there are two interests at stake, and there's also an interest in the fetal life at stake as well. And in your brief, you say that the existing framework accommodates, that's your word, he's talking to one of the folks, but the interest of the pregnant woman and the interest of the fetus. And the problem, I think the other side would say, and the reason this issue is hard, is that you can't accommodate both interests. You have to pick. That is absolutely correct. You have to pick one. That's the fundamental problem. I'm quoting again. That's the fundamental problem. And one interest has to prevail over the other at any given point in time. And that's why this is so challenging, I think. He added, and here's the crucial part, when you have those two interests at stake, and both are important, as you acknowledge, why should this court be the arbiter rather than Congress, the state legislatures, state supreme courts, the people? Why? Well, I would imagine because the left knows that they're not going to get their way if they leave it up to the legislature. Well, I don't give a crap about your way. I don't. It's wrong to use the court this way. It's wrong to have the court writing law like this, which is exactly what they're doing. The best thing to do would be to follow the 10th Amendment and return this to the states. Now, my preference, due to the contentiousness of this issue and the anger and the derision and the how divided we are, my preference would be that the states not even decide it. That you let the localities decide it. So, for example, let's say I live in a small town relatively close to a big city, okay? Chances are my small town would vote to say we're not allowing abortion here. We are banning abortion within our borders. So let's say they did that. Okay, great. If I'm against abortion, that would suit me just fine, right? Now the city down the road, the larger metropolitan area, says, you know what, we're going to allow abortion within our borders, but here are going to be the limitations, here how it's going to work, and so on and so forth. My argument is, what is that to me? I may not like it. I may not like the law that they passed. I may not allow their permissiveness when it comes to abortion. But what is that to me? I don't live there. Why should I have a say on what they decide to do within their borders if I don't live there? I can try to persuade. I can argue against. But why should I have a say? And you can apply this principle to so many issues, not just abortion, but abortion particularly. This goes back to what I was arguing to the Milton Friedman quote that I used in my video on classical liberalism. It requires a self-denying ordinance of the most extreme kind. It requires that we put up with temporary evils, or what we consider temporary evils. We have to put up with other people's decisions that we may not like within their jurisdictions because we don't live there. Now, if I feel very strongly one way or the other, and my jurisdiction at the local level is doing something I don't like, I can leave. I can go somewhere else where the law is more to my liking. And if it's decided at the local level, you probably won't have to go very far, right? Now, the pro-abortion people and the anti-abortion people are going to disagree with me on this. I know they are. Because they want their way. But you're never going to have peace on this issue if only one side ever gets its way. It's never going to end. And we've had 50 years of commotion and war, essentially, over this issue for so long. And my issue is perhaps federalism is the cure to where nobody really gets their way, and then everybody kind of gets their way, but at least we can have peace about it. Now, one of the things I've heard so many people say is that this is really going to hurt low-income women. I think Sotomayor, or maybe it was one of the attorneys, made that argument. Okay, well, that argument's ridiculous on its face. There is no abortion argument that stands up to scrutiny at all, in my opinion. All their arguments are horrible, except for one I'm going to go over in just a second. If a woman happens to be on the low-income side, lives in a place where they decide, hey, we don't want to allow abortion, and she is so desperate to have access to abortion, leave and go somewhere else. If it's decided on the local level, again, you won't have to go very far. But even if it's decided on the state level, just go to another state that allows for it. Now, what you're going to say is, well, that's impossible. These women don't have the money to do that, and so on and so forth. That is a line of crap, and I'll tell you why. Because there are hundreds upon hundreds of people right now who have nothing, who are far more poor than practically anybody in the United States, and they are willing to, with basically nothing, pick up and walk hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of miles across the desert in many cases, risking death to themselves and their families for just the small inkling of a chance that their children might be able to become Americans. And the poorest of the poor have been doing that for over 200 years. So do not tell me that it cannot be done. That is ridiculous. And if you want it bad enough, this is America, Jack. If you want it bad enough, you can make it happen. Figure it out. If you are so desperate to have the ability to have your babies killed, for whatever reason, you will figure out a way to get to a place where that is allowed. The inverse is also true. If you are so desperate to live in a place where babies are not killed, you will figure out a way. Just look at all the immigrants so desperate to get to this country because of the opportunities they would have here that they don't have in the place they're coming from. Not even for them, but for their children. And tell me you can't do it. Now, personally, I'm against abortion. I think abortion is abhorrent, awful. I think it's evil. I do not think women that get abortions are evil at all. I have no ill feelings towards a woman who has had an abortion or is getting an abortion at all. I don't think they're bad. I don't think they're wrong. I don't think they're evil or anything of the sort. They're in a situation I couldn't even begin to understand. I have no judgment to make about them at all. I don't think very highly of abortion providers because they know exactly what they're doing. And they should know better. I also don't like the idea of the government stepping in and telling somebody what they can and can't do with their body. If that were all this was, then I would be on the side of the abortion folks. But that's not all this is. That's what makes this issue unique. There are two bodies in question here. I don't care what a woman does with her body. That's her business. That's her natural rights, her body. She owns it. But I do care, and the state does have a role to play. Society does have a role to play in determining what one person can do with somebody else's body, with or without their consent. You don't just get to kill somebody because you don't want them around. You don't get to end a life because it's inconvenient to you or for whatever reason. You don't get to do that. And society does have a role to play. And the state does have a role to play in making that determination, what can and can be done with somebody else's body. Now, again, I don't think abortion advocates have a leg to stand on. Their arguments have been debunked a million times over. I could debunk them all right now. I'm not going to do that. So many people have already done that. Matt Walsh did a really good video where he spent, 3 minutes or something just debunking all the arguments. except for one. There's one argument that they could make that would stand up at least to reason and logic. Okay? Now, it's an argument that none of them make, and I'll tell you why in a second. The argument is that they care more about the convenience and the desires of the mother than they do about the natural right to life of that baby, of the other human being. I say that one more time. They care more about the convenience and the desires of the woman than they do about the natural right to life of that child. Now, I've never heard an abortion advocate make that argument, and I don't think I've heard that because they know how evil that sounds and how evil it is to put convenience and your own, a preference of one individual and not having their life interfered with over the natural right to life of another human being. Who would have that position? Well, frankly, I think many of them, that is their position. Truthfully, I think that's really what they think. And that's an evil argument, in my opinion. But it's the only argument I've ever heard, or I've ever even thought about, for abortion that makes any sense. The rest of them don't make sense. They fall flat on their face when put under scrutiny. So, I'm hoping they overturn Roe v. Wade, return this to the states. That's what I'm hoping for. And I hope the states have the wherewithal to not be overbearing and to really take their time with this. I know some of them will not. But that's just my view. It's a difficult issue, and it involves that self-denying ordinance I talked about and letting people decide for themselves through their legislatures what the law should be in their own areas. Localities would be best, in my opinion, but the states, at the very least, the federal government should have no role to play, in my view, on this issue. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Be nice. Don't be a jerk in the comment section. I'd like to hear what you have to say. And if you like what you've seen, please subscribe to the channel. Check out my other videos. Until next time, this is The Sovereign States. My name is Brian. Appreciate you stopping by.